When you trace greatness back to its roots, you don't find glory, you find grit. In the small mining town of Ashington, Northumberland, life was carved out of stone and struggle. The streets were black with coal dust, and the people were built from endurance. It was here, in a cramped family home, that a boy named Bobby Charlton first kicked a ragged football made from old socks. His father worked deep in the mines, his hands blackened by the earth. His mother, Sissy, was the beating heart of the house, a strong woman who believed her sons could rise above the pit. Jack, Tommy, Bobby, 3 boys, 1 dream: to break free from the darkness below and chase something brighter. Bobby was quiet, thoughtful, but when the ball touched his feet, something changed. The shy boy became an artist, painting hope across the grey streets with every touch. Football was his escape, his rebellion against a world that told him to dig, not to dream. A young Charlton, barely in his teens, dribbling through puddles, his breath fogging the morning air. Each kick echoes with purpose. At 15, he caught the eye of Manchester United scouts. Newcastle called first, the local choice. But destiny had other plans. Sir Busby, the man rebuilding Manchester United after the war, offered him a chance to become part of something greater, the Busby Babes, a team of youth, of promise, of dreams. Busby would later say, "When I saw Bobby, I saw grace, but not the easy kind, the kind you earn through struggle." At 18, Charlton made his debut. 2 goals against Charlton Athletic. The headlines were small, but for the boy from Ashington, it was the start of something eternal. He had escaped the mines, but not the shadows, because soon, tragedy would find him. And before the world saw the hero of 1966, before the medals, before the knighthood, Bobby Charlton would face the fire that almost ended it all. February the 6th, 1958. A blanket of snow lay over Munich. A chartered plane waited on the runway, its engines straining against the icy wind. Inside, laughter filled the cabin. The Busby Babes, Europe's brightest young team, heading home from Belgrade after securing a place in the European Cup semi-finals. They were invincible, or so it seemed. 23 people boarded that plane. 23 never came home. On the 3rd attempt to take off, the Elizabethan aircraft skidded across the slush-covered runway and tore apart on impact. Flames, smoke, silence. It happened in seconds. A generation of talent, gone in an instant. Bobby Charlton sat near the back. He had swapped seats with a teammate before takeoff. That single act, simple, meaningless at the time, saved his life. The explosion threw him unconscious into the snow, his seat ripped from the fuselage. Rescuer Harry Gregg, the goalkeeper, stumbled through the wreckage. He pulled survivors from the flames, calling out names into the frozen air. Busby was alive, but broken. Edwards was fighting for his life. The smell of jet fuel and burning metal filled the night. Bobby awoke in hospital hours later, dazed, disoriented. He asked, "How are the lads?" No one answered. 8 of them were gone. Duncan Edwards, Roger Byrne, Eddie Coleman, Tommy Taylor, Liam Whelan. Names that once filled stadiums now whispered like ghosts. Duncan, his closest friend, would cling to life for 15 days before passing away. Bobby never forgot that number. 15 days. 15 reminders of how fragile destiny can be. The world mourned, flags at half-mast. Thousands gathered outside Old Trafford in the cold rain. Manchester United, the pride of English football, was shattered. Sir Busby lay in a hospital bed, asking again and again, "What of my boys?" Doctors told him he had a 1 in 3 chance of survival. Busby later said he felt he was walking toward the gates of heaven, until his wife told him, "You must go back. Your work isn't done." And so he did. Charlton was left with physical scars that healed quickly, but the psychological ones ran deep. Survivor's guilt haunted him, the endless question of, why me? He struggled to sleep, replaying the screams, the crash, the silence. He had been 20 years old. A footballer, yes, but still a boy. And that boy had just witnessed his world burn. Months later, against all odds, Bobby returned to the pitch. Old Trafford stood silent as he walked out in red once again. The crowd rose. Some cheered, some wept. Every touch of the ball felt sacred, every cheer an echo for the fallen. He scored that day. A goal of beauty and pain combined. That match wasn't about points or trophies. It was about survival, about defiance, about honouring those who never made it back. Busby rebuilt United from the ashes. He promised to carry the spirit of the Busby Babes into the future. And Bobby, carrying the heaviest burden of all, became the embodiment of that promise. Yet, away from the cameras, the cracks showed. He distanced himself emotionally, even from his family. The trauma left him quiet, withdrawn. His brother Jack couldn't understand the silence between them. In later years, their relationship would fracture. Two proud men, scarred by history in different ways. But still, Bobby played on. He channeled the pain into precision, grace, and an unshakable will. The boy from Ashington who once dreamed of escape was now a man trying to escape his own memories. Harry Gregg once said, "Bobby carried the weight of Munich on his shoulders for the rest of his life." And maybe that was true. But it was that same weight that forged him into something extraordinary. For from every tragedy comes a choice, to surrender or to rebuild. This was no longer just a football club. This was a family bound by grief, rebuilt by hope. And from that wreckage, one man's will to honour the dead would carry Manchester United back to life. But redemption never comes easy. Because for Sir Bobby Charlton, survival was not the end of his story. It was only the beginning of his resurrection. The years that followed were not of celebration, but of rebuilding. Manchester United was a club in mourning, a team stitched together from memory and hope. But out of the silence came a new sound, the steady rhythm of boots on grass driven by one man's quiet determination. Bobby Charlton. He could have walked away. No one would have blamed him. Yet every time he stepped onto that pitch, he played not for himself, but for those who couldn't. The Munich dead were his invisible teammates, and the red shirt was his memorial. Sir Matt Busby, scarred but unbroken, returned to Old Trafford after months in recovery. Together, he and Bobby began the long road back. They built with youth again, faith, not fear, guiding every decision. A young George Best arrived, followed by Dennis Law. United were being reborn, not through anger, but through artistry. Charlton's game evolved. Once a raw attacker, he became the heartbeat of the team, a midfield general who dictated tempo with elegance and power. His strikes from distance became legend, thunderous, precise, unstoppable. It wasn't just football anymore, it was catharsis. Through the early 60s, United rose again. Cup finals, crowds returning. The chants of Busby's Babes became an anthem of defiance. But deep down, Bobby was still haunted by Munich. He rarely spoke of it. When teammates celebrated, he smiled softly, almost apologetically, as though happiness was something he had to earn. In 1966, destiny called again, this time in red and white for England. Alf Ramsey's side entered the World Cup with quiet confidence. Bobby, now 28, was their leader in spirit, the silent engine driving them forward. He scored twice in the semi-final against Portugal, 2 goals that felt like redemption written in real time. As the final whistle blew at Wembley and England lifted the World Cup, Bobby did not leap or shout. He simply looked to the sky, his face still. His brother Jack ran to embrace him, 2 sons of a mining family now at the summit of the world. But behind the celebration was reflection. For Bobby, that golden trophy was not just victory, it was vindication for all he had lost. In that moment, England crowned a champion, but football crowned a survivor. Months later, he would win the Ballon d'Or, the highest honour in world football. The boy who once dribbled through puddles in Ashington was now the best player on earth. Yet even then, he remained humble. No extravagance, no arrogance, just work. Quiet, relentless, disciplined work. Manchester United, powered by his example, became a force once again, chasing glory in the league and in Europe, the very competition that had taken so much from them, from ashes to ambition, from heartbreak to hope. Charlton's journey had reignited a dream, but one final mountain remained. One that stood not just for United, but for the souls of the Busby Babes themselves. Because 10 years after the Munich disaster, destiny was preparing its full circle. And this time, Bobby would not just play for the fallen, he would lead them to glory. 29th of May, 1968, Wembley Stadium, London. Under the floodlights, history waited. 10 years after Munich, Manchester United stood on the edge of destiny. One match away from becoming champions of Europe. The ghosts of the past were everywhere. The Busby Babes, the Lost Brothers, the decade of pain. For Bobby Charlton, this was not just a final. It was a farewell to grief. The opponent was Benfica, the giants of Portugal, led by the great Eusebio. Two nations watched, two legends prepared, and one promise lingered in Bobby's heart, that United would rise again. The whistle blew. The first half was cagey, tense. Then, in the 53rd minute, Charlton arrived in the box. A simple flick of the head, perfectly timed. Goal. 1-0 United. Wembley roared, and for a moment, it felt like the heavens opened. But Benfica were not done. They equalised late in the match, sending hearts back into the shadows. 90 minutes gone. 1-1. Extra time, tired legs, heavy lungs, 10 years of memories pressing down on every player in red. Then came the moment that changed everything. George Best, the maverick genius, dribbled past the keeper and slid the ball into an empty net. 2-1. Moments later, Brian Kidd, just 19 years old, scored another. 3-1. Wembley erupted. And then, fittingly, it was Charlton who sealed it. A sweeping finish. 4-1. The man who had risen from the wreckage in Munich now lifted the European Cup. Exactly 1 decade after the tragedy that nearly ended his life. As he held the silver trophy high, tears filled Busby's eyes. For him, it was more than victory. It was resurrection. The manager, who had buried 8 of his boys, was now standing with a new generation, crowned kings of Europe. The cameras panned to Bobby, exhausted, emotional, and silent. No wild celebration, no grand gestures. Just a quiet man looking to the stars, whispering names that the world would never hear. That night at Wembley was more than sport. It was spiritual. A requiem turned into a symphony. From the ashes of Munich to the summit of Europe, Sir Matt Busby and Bobby Charlton had written football's most human story, of loss, loyalty, and redemption. By the end of his career, Charlton had won 3 league titles, an FA Cup and the European Cup. For England, 1 World Cup. For himself, countless records, 106 caps, 49 goals, the embodiment of English football's soul. But even with all the silver and gold, his true legacy was invisible. It lived in the example he set, in the discipline, in the humility. He taught that greatness is not about triumph alone, but about what you overcome to reach it. In the dressing room after the final, Busby placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "You've done it, son. You've brought them back." Bobby didn't reply. He didn't need to. The world already knew. The circle was complete. The fallen had been honored, the promise fulfilled. But legacies never rest. They live on, carried by new generations. And Sir Bobby Charlton's story, forged in tragedy, crowned in glory, would echo far beyond that night at Wembley. Time moves on, but legends do not fade. They become part of the game itself, whispered in stadiums, sung in chants, carved in stone. And no name is spoken with more reverence than Sir Bobby Charlton. When he finally hung up his boots in the early 70s, Old Trafford stood to applaud for minutes, that felt like hours. He left the pitch not as a star, but as a symbol of survival, humility, and excellence. The boy from Ashington had carried an entire generation's hope, and somehow he never let it drop. But Bobby's story didn't end when the final whistle blew. He remained a servant to Manchester United, first as a director, then as its moral compass. Through decades of change, through triumphs and turmoil, he was the one constant. His presence was quiet, but his influence was vast. Managers came and went, players rose and fell, but Bobby remained, the bridge between Busby's vision and Ferguson's empire. Under Sir Alex Ferguson, Manchester United rose again to global dominance, a dynasty of modern football. Yet every time the team lifted a trophy, they lifted it in the shadow of Charlton's legacy. His spirit was in every goal, every comeback, every roar of belief. Off the pitch, he dedicated himself to causes far from the spotlight. His foundation worked to clear landmines around the world, a fitting mission for a man who had walked through fire himself. Children who had never heard of Munich or Wembley would live safely because of Sir Bobby Charlton's compassion. He aged with grace, never bitter, always dignified. When fans met him, they said he still had that same gentle humility, a man who had seen the worst of humanity, yet still believed in its best. And then, in October 2023, the news broke. Sir Bobby Charlton had passed away at the age of 86. The world stopped. From Ashington to Old Trafford, from England to Argentina, tributes poured in. David Beckham called him my hero. Cristiano Ronaldo wrote, a true legend who will never be forgotten. At Old Trafford, thousands gathered in the rain. The flags hung low, flowers and scarves covered the gates, and as the crowd sang, "Glory, glory, Man United," it felt like they were singing to heaven. For those who knew, his story was more than football. It was the story of endurance, of a man who lived through fire and built beauty from ashes. He once said, "Football is about dreams and surviving to chase them." Those words now stand engraved outside Old Trafford, a promise to every young player who dares to dream. Bobby Charlton was not just a legend, he was a lesson. That greatness born from tragedy carries a deeper kind of light. One man's journey, one unbreakable spirit. From the ashes of Munich to the glory of the world, he showed what it means to endure, to believe, and to rebuild. Sir Bobby Charlton, forever united,